welcome. I'm Ashley Gattuso with Curated. We have Hung Lee with Recruiting Brainfood here with us today. Hi, Hung.
Hey, Ashley, how you doing?
I'm good. Welcome. We are excited for you to screen share with us today. Hung has a newsletter called Recruiting Brainfood, or is that the official name of it?
It is Recruiting Brainfood. Yeah,
Okay, yeah, that's the official
recruitingbrainfood.com.
name. So you go to recruitingbrainfood.com, you'll see like alpha action he wants you to take on there is to subscribe to his newsletter. But he also has a podcast, he has a web series, he has a private Facebook group, he goes live on LinkedIn. He's one of the few special people who are allowed to just go live whenever they want to on
It's
LinkedIn.
like 20,000 people like every month getting those licenses. Like, yeah,
I
produce
know.
video.
Yeah, so
Um,
they're selectively releasing things like that to, the lesser of us in the world. He also has like a WhatsApp robo hung, like your the
Robo
chat
hung.
bot.
1,000 people on it. Talking to a robotic version of me. Preferring that
Love
to the
it.
biological human. So
So
yeah.
obviously Hung has a lot to say about building a following, building an audience. And at the core of all of that is his newsletter, which goes out to over 20,000 people weekly and prepares them for the week ahead in recruiting and HR. So I'm going to pass it over to Hung and let him walk us through his newsletter and talk to us about what goals he's set for that and how he has achieved them.
Okay, cool. So before I share the screen, actually, just want to say thanks for getting me on air and having a chat with everybody here. I think everyone watching this has got to be like a newsletter person, right? So I just want to firstly put it out there to say I am no expert in doing this. I've just basically stumbled my way forward as I went with very little strategy, very little idea. And I still consider myself an enthusiastic amateur more than anything else. So definitely comment on the comment below. Let me know where I could improve or could get better. I'm totally open for all of that. Super interested in other people's feedback and other people's techniques. But this is my way of doing it. And it seems to have had some kind of decent success up until now. Okay, so let me just share screen. Make sure I haven't got any dodgy browser stuff up. Okay, here we go.
Don't make me have to edit out the things you show us.
So I always use another browser. There's another tip for you. All right, so I'm using a product called Revue, revue.co, and this is a tiny Dutch-based business, but I really like them for this style of newsletter. So the newsletter I'm writing is a editorial newsletter or a curated newsletter, essentially meaning that it is half my commentary and content, but in the main, I'm curating content from other original content creators and creating a digest. And that's basically what Recruiting Brainfood is. If you want to encounter it, let me just go here. Online, you can go to newsletters.recruitingbrainfood.com. You can see a bunch of these archives out here, and I'll show you what it looks like. Basically, how it's kind of positioned, it just looks like this. It is essentially, this is the web version of what you would see into your inbox if you received it. But Revue also create a pretty standard kind of web version of it so people can consume it there. But I wanted to give you the production example of what it looks like before I dive into the development side, which I've got lined up for you because I send it out every Sunday. And I always make it a rule to start the newsletter really on Sunday after I've sent the last one. So I've already kind of built a few things that are going to go out in the Sunday to come. How does it look? Basically, I'm curating right now issue 214. A few things I've learned in doing newsletters is that it's quite important to be super consistent in your information architecture. So in plain language, that means if you've got a certain way of organizing your copy and your images, kind of stick to it because people get used to it. And essentially, you want to habituate the audience to get used to it so that they don't have to hunt around for information when they receive your newsletter. they have an expectation as to when that where the content that they like most is, and they want the reassurance that it's always there. I think this is actually true for any subscription service, by the way.
Mhm.
So if you think about the YouTube channels that you subscribe to, or the podcasts you listen to, or whatever it is that you've put some you've committed an email to and say, hey, I'm definitely going to spend some attention here. Chances are there is a regularity to how that information is organized on screen, on air, or through your ears. So very important that this is consistent. It's actually the primary reason why I've kept this like super old photo instead of a logo. This is like, there's no better evidence of me being an amateur than the fact I've got like this really old photo of
I
myself
don't know.
on.
I love the little graphic that you have on some of your web series stuff.
Yeah, that was an
The
attempt at a
illustration.
logo. Yeah, it was an attempt. I'll tell you what it is. Funny story, actually. So this photo is really old. It's like 7 years old or something.
Okay.
And I was just conscious of the fact that I don't like people that don't look like their photos.
Mm-hmm.
The old, everyone tries to look like 20 years younger or
Oh
10
yeah.
pounds lighter, etc.
Like a dating
And
profile image.
right, right. And I was saying to myself, you know what, don't be one of those people. And hence I thought, right, this photo's so old, I need to update it and get rid. But then I realized I was creating this audience in recruiting brain food, and everyone was receiving this photo into their inbox every week.
Mm-hmm.
To the point where I realized that actually it's part of the brand now, and therefore very difficult to kind of move this away, because I understood at that point that actually I'd habituated the audience to expect this photo,
Mm.
expect this image. So yeah, I've got a crisis basically, because I'm getting older. At some point, I'm totally not going to look like this dude in the logo.
True.
And the graphic was actually my attempt to
I like it.
immortalize my image, so to speak, to say, can I get something that is frozen in time that I could use, and people get used to that instead of used to this.
Well,
Um,
what I was thinking is that we can call that the recruiting brain food bearded branding.
Bearded branding, why not? Why not? But cartoon images can work because exactly the
It's
fact that
so cute.
it kind of makes you immortal, if you like, and
Hmm.
it's, you know what, in some ways with the zeitgeist as well, particularly as you look on, a lot more media being consumed on gaming channels, on AR, VR going forward, etc.
Hmm.
So those types of non-realistic representations of yourself, I think, do have a part to play in the future. Anyway, going on to this, same image, same logo. Make sure that's absolutely rock solid, doesn't move. Um, uh, the structure is the same. So I kick off always the same way. Typically, I promote one of my other channels as the first thing I do.
Hmm.
So another tip I would give newsletter folks or anybody who's building community is that once you've built one channel, it's actually much easier to build another because you've suddenly got this big signpost that you can point people to. So if you're successful in one thing, bear in mind that you can convert that success to another and give yourself a massive competitive advantage. So what I'm doing here is I usually do a live stream on Fridays. This is what you see on LinkedIn Live and
Hmm.
stuff like this. And I promote my LinkedIn Live show on Friday. That's happening on Friday with the newsletter on Sunday. So I say, hey, Brainfood Live episode, whatever, it's going to be 85 or something. It is this, click to the link, go there. And that's just my way of just giving you, the audience, another opportunity to interact with your content. And in fact, interact with each
Hmm.
other, interact with whatever, because you've provided that additional space for them.
This has prompted a question for me.
Okay.
Do you feel like the weekly prep of each newsletter and having to have the Fridays live promo in that newsletter has made you like stay ahead of things much more than if you were kind of working more on the fly or you weren't committed to that newsletter?
Oh yeah, so that's actually a very important point, which we'll call our third point, which is to have a cadence and
Hmm.
not only regularity in terms of or consistency in terms of the presentation, but a cadence in terms of your production. I think is super important,
Hmm.
because it keeps your discipline going. It makes sure you don't miss it. Again, it's habituation of the audience. They won't commit to you unless they can see that you're committing to them. Again, think about consumer stuff. I mean, don't you hate it when you watch a Netflix pilot and it's amazing, and they don't actually do the series? Or even worse, what if they do the series one, it's absolutely amazing, and they don't follow up, they cancel the
Mhm.
show, right? You feel horrible. Why? Because you've already emotionally invested in this, and you're thinking, why have I tried to fall in love with this story and fall in love with this character and build my kind of life around it? I'm watching it every Saturday afternoon or whatever it is, and then suddenly they cancel on you. It's a huge betrayal. So
Mhm.
business, so anything subscription wise is the same. You're asking people to give you your attention. They're not going to do that unless they know you're going to be around. If you're going to skip the odd week or you're going to send it whenever, they're going to say, how is that different from any other content that's out there? I need to at least not think when this content is going to arrive. I need to know it's going to be there. So you need to establish a regular cadence for delivery. It doesn't have to be daily, could be weekly. I would say minimum monthly. I think any sort of bigger distance
Mhm.
between that becomes too hard to create habits. But that kind of cadence, I think, is super important. So, answer the question, yes, is the short answer to that.
Great. And so, guys, just pay attention. He is specifically telling people things they can do to get more of what they're here for in the first place.
Oh yeah, pay
Right.
attention. All of this is
Hmm.
practical stuff, folks. You can do it tomorrow, and that's what I want you to do. Okay. Next thing is super important. Within the first intro, I always make sure I put a thank you session for the people that have advocated or promoted the newsletter the week before. Now, the reason why I do that is because I discovered that actually advocacy is a huge way to drive extra subscription traffic. In fact, I would say for non-paid traffic, because I don't pay for any advertising,
Hmm.
primarily because I'm impoverished. No, um, no, I wanted serious subscribers, right? So I didn't want accidental subscribers or the folks that actually do click on Facebook ads. Like, who is that person? I don't know. So basically, I thought advocacy in group was the way to do it. But I discovered that through happenstance because it was through the advocacy that other people did anyway that it just triggered these signups. And I thought, oh wow, I mean, that's amazing. And then I thought, right, I need to find a way to really thank them, even if it's just a small gesture. There's not an affiliate scheme or anything like that. It's just me saying, hey Mark, thank you, man. I mean, that's awesome, thank you for sharing this. Or it's me saying, hey Vanessa, thank you very much for promoting it. Super important, because basically without the community support, it ain't gonna happen. So even though I'm kind of chewing up a bit of real estate on screen, that's actually a significant trade-off, because you want to hit people with some links or some quality or whatever. So I'm breaking some rules already by super high profile thank you. But I thought the community was much more important, and much better for long-term growth, and it's worth that space
Hmm.
rather than putting it at the bottom where people might not read it.
Okay.
Okay, so I've built a bunch of stuff which I think will help people kind of be. These are just like little side apps. So basically, I come from a fairly technical background. I've got a lot of technical friends, and essentially, we've built a bunch of tools that can help other people interact with each other. But that probably isn't a do tomorrow thing. That may be something that you would experiment with, if you had those types of folks.
Hmm.
Anyway, so I put a signature here. I'm not actually sure whether this is useful or not, but it's basically just saying, hey, listen, by the way, if you fancy it, you can go to any of these other places as well. Again, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, because I don't know whether this is good or bad. I just think, okay, there's some space there. I might as well tell people there's other stuff that's going on. Um, Okay, so how do I keep going as a business? Because obviously this takes time. Only way I could do it was basically go through sponsors. So newsletters, you should know by now, there's basically two ways to make money, which is you do through subscriptions, get the readers to pay, or you do through ads or sponsors, get people who want access to the audience to pay. And I went first for the sponsor option. I know a lot of people would recommend going to subscribe option. I don't think either of they're not good or bad. They're just
Right.
different ways of doing it. They come with different sets of compromises, I would say. The compromise for doing sponsor stuff like I'm doing is obviously you concede screen real estate, which I'm doing. which ideally you don't want to do. And the trade-off for subscribers is ultimately dividing your audience in two, because there's going to be a bunch of people that consumed your content on the free tier that are not going to subscribe. And then suddenly you have to kind of produce two products for those folks. And like I say, it may be something I'll experiment with in the future. I do think subscriptions is a revenue model I feel like I owe it to myself to try, actually. However, I have gone with sponsor only primarily because I don't want to divide the experience for the audience. I know a lot of people say, hey, you should customize everything, and do it on time zones, for instance, and learn about the audience, and capture information about, oh, Ashley likes to click on that stuff, give more of that stuff to her rather than what Hung would click on, that kind of philosophy. I didn't do that mainly because of the overhead of producing that individuated experience. So the production overhead was too high. But also because of the philosophy of this newsletter is to say everyone gets this at the same time, and no one is ahead. So it's kind of it has a kind of a democratic ethos, so to speak.
Yeah. So I think one thing when you're thinking about subscriptions, because I've talked with a few people about this, about how they decided what, it's very hard for some people to figure out what it is that is worth paying extra for if they have been delivering a certain thing for free. And I know that some people have had success with doing a case study, or like, it's like not more of the same, it's something different that comes with that tier, so that the free people don't feel like anything that they were getting is now being held back, but that they might bump up to that subscription tier for something extra that they feel is worth that price. But again, if you have a sponsor, that's great.
Let me just interrupt you there. You just said the phrase, which I think is absolutely perfect, which is people aren't going to buy, they're not going to pay for more of what they got for free. So if you think that I share typically 10, 15 pieces in a newsletter, if, I sell, hey, subscribe, you get 30, people aren't going to do that.
Right.
They're not going to do that. Or subscribe and I'll show you the really good stuff that are hidden from everyone else. What kind of idiot, how people are going to feel really pissed off at that, right? So it has to be different. And I haven't found what the different is. I've got a few ideas what that might be. But for instance, one of the things that I'm thinking of doing is maybe we do more live session. So right now, for instance, it's just a broadcast email I send out to X amount of people. They don't get the opportunity to interact with me or anybody else via that mechanism. Perhaps on the kind of paid tier, what I would do is keep the newsletter the same, but I could say, hey, listen, we're going to do a private roundtable for people that have subscribed that's going to be focused on this topic. Are you in? And then do it like that. And it's a different product, really. But you're using the newsletter then as really an acquisition channel rather than monetizing the newsletter itself, if that makes sense.
Yes, I completely get that. Okay, cool. We're looking forward to whatever decisions you make. We will watch the evolution.
Yeah, everyone reading pay. I might just beg. I mean, that's possible. I've tried it before, actually, for charity donations, and people do pay because I wanted to plant some trees, I think. And I think I'll do that again for my birthday, where every subscriber, I'm asking them to basically donate what is in effect $10 or their $10 equivalent local currency. There's another problem with subscriptions, by the way. You automatically will address the audience that can pay most. And recruiting Brainfood is, of course, an international product. If I go $5, maybe US, that's totally cool. But let's say it goes to Nepal. Those folks aren't going to pay that. So I have to think about that. And that's part of the reason why I've pulled back from this subscription tier so far. But anyway, yeah, donations can sometimes work. You can say, hey, donate whatever your $10 equivalent is for this thing. And presumably I could say, hey, I'm starving. Maybe I could try that. I don't know. No, right now sponsors will work, right? So basically I have created the sponsor slot. So I know a lot of products actually have like payment built into this. And they have sort of little spaces where you can create these things to say, oh, here a sponsor spot. Revue doesn't have this, which I'm actually kind of thankful for. So I've had to just create the space within the content. But it works just as well. I work in recruiting, of course, so a key sponsor here would be any kind of business that's interested in addressing the recruiting audience. And we can see here Workable, one of our sponsors, one of our great sponsors. They're an applicant tracking system. So if you're hiring for a bunch of people, more than just a few, you would need one of these technologies. And Workable, one of the best out there, and they want to interact with my audience, so they're one of our sponsors. And of course, the sponsor revenue you just deal with offline. You can handle that without, you need to have conversations with those folks and do all that. But ultimately, you can say to them, hey, listen, this is where I've got the sponsor slot. This is where it is. Here's the copy you get. Here's the CTA. Here's the logo, et cetera, et cetera.
Have you seen growth in like interest in sponsorships with COVID-19 and the job environment that we are faced with right now?
Answer is no, because the job environment has been super tough, and because I'm addressing the recruiting audience and companies that service that, those companies have also been crushed as well. So
Okay.
it's been a really tough year. Although what I have seen is that a lot of companies have been defensive with budget for a long time, but they're starting to pile in at this moment for next year. And yeah, they're going for it in a big way. So yeah, we should be okay. But it's been a very tough year, very tough industry for this year. But yeah, this is just an example, though. If people are running newsletters and they're getting interest from sponsors, this is the way in which you can do it. I should probably talk very quickly about this, by the way, because I know a lot of companies, and I've noticed actually a lot of newsletters and podcasts and all those types of things have sometimes struggled to acquire sponsors, which has never been a difficulty for me. And that's absolutely zero to do with any personal quality I have, right? I assume I'm usually a big deterrent.
I know you're not really selling yourself here.
Seriously. But I figured out. So I've got friends that run much bigger distribution lists than me. So I've got 25,000 here. Other people got 180,000. They can't get sponsors. Why? It's basically because of audience breadth. I'm addressing a narrow audience, basically recruiters and HR folks. So that the buyer of the slot is going to think, right, I don't care about the big number. I care about the numbers of relevant. And if you're running a generic newsletter or you're running a generic podcast or whatever it is, you might get huge numbers, and you might get, I guess, consumer people coming in and sponsoring purely based on the size of the audience that you have. That's great. But most of us kind of fall in between those two slots. We're not big enough to get the consumer level brands, but we're too broad to get the narrow brands that want the relevancy. So I fluked it in the sense, okay, this is my space. I'm in it, and it so happens a lot of the sponsors were themselves subscribers at one point. In fact, that's the primary acquisition channel. So they start off as subscribers, they hear about it, they read it, they like it. Pretty much they want to get involved, and then they email in to say, hey, listen, how do I get in there? And then that's basically perfect for you as a content creator, curator, because then you don't have a huge amount of customer acquisition costs, so to speak.
So how do you communicate results with those sponsors? Are you giving them a report with the open and click metrics?
Yeah, absolutely. It's available. I mean, as best as I can do it. Again, this is also related a great deal to this is where the software comes into play. Like, what platform are you using to do this? I love Revue, they're great, but unfortunately their analytics, I don't think, the most powerful a part of what they do. So I can't give like super broken down analytics, so to speak. But yeah, we do get information, of course, like open rates, click-throughs, what links people did click on. And in fact, we have a lot of information that rewind 5 years ago, I'd be able to share, but these days, obviously, with data privacy issues, you can't actually share it. So when people say, "Oh, who clicked on this?" I know, but I can't tell you. you know, it's like I can't share that. It's
Yeah.
like literally I can't do it. So I think with a lot of sponsors that come in, my message to them is, look, listen. This is great for brand building. We can tell you it goes to this amount of people. We can also tell you it's a double opt-in email. So people subscribe to it and they have to confirm that they want to receive it. Open rate is this number. Click-through rate is this number. We have these types of companies that consistently subscribe. Feel free to speak to those folks. And at the end of the day, if you want to kind of jostle alongside with those companies, then that's the way to do it.
Got it.
I guess for folks who are listening and starting out on the newsletter side, on the sponsor side, it's almost better to always have a sponsor when you start. So one of the things is you can be kind of tempted to just take a sponsor and then run a couple of weeks without a sponsor and then take another sponsor or whatever. I didn't do that. I waited until basically I knew I could sell out every single issue. Because I wanted to basically say, hey, this is always there. It's always in demand and it's always sold out, even if that means crashing down your price a little bit. Because what you don't want to do, in my opinion, is sell a big ticket sponsor value, but then incur a great deal of what I call sales cost. So particularly if you're a newsletter person, you're a one-man band, typically a one-person band, maybe you can run this business as a solo play, which is one of the attractions, I think, of doing it. What you don't want to do is basically spend a huge amount of time pitching people about how wonderful your newsletter is.
Yeah, you're not writing a newsletter to be an ad salesperson.
No,
Right.
but if you put the number too high, then that's what you're going to have to do.
Right.
And I just think that will firstly directly detract from the quality of the work you're going to produce because you're one person. And secondly, you end up becoming a little bit of a supplicant to the the people spending the money on you. And I wonder whether that's a good position to be in. So my philosophy is, look, if you want to sponsor it, great, but you know what? It's not absolutely essential for me personally. But the slot is there. I want to work with companies that have innovative messages, if you like, companies that go ahead and want to address an enthusiastic audience of recruiter and HR people, then yeah, let's go. Other than that, I'm not spending a huge amount of time doing it. Okay, cool. So moving on to the big piece, essentially, this is what I call the brain food. Now, I've labeled it in this way, and it's not relevant what you call it, but the idea is ultimately I'm going to create or curate content pieces I find from the internet and elsewhere that I think is recruiting brain food, meaning it's about recruiting and it stimulates the mind. So one of the things I've noticed, and I'm sure everyone here has noticed it as well, is that the world is just so noisy with content. I mean, exponentially increasing times 10 every year, right? In terms of the numbers of stuff that's happening. Newsletters actually a part of this ecosystem now. You know how there's going to be 10 times more newsletters this time next year than it is this year. All of this is great, but what it does mean is that the signal to noise ratio is always a challenge. And what you do as a curator, what I'm doing as a curator, is to make sure that that signal to noise ratio is as high as possible for this audience so that they don't have to swim through it all. I've done it. I'm just going to serve you these great things that I've discovered. And the rule I have is number one, no mainstream content. So a lot of people get upset at me for not featuring their amazing blog or whatever it is. And I'm saying, yo, it's totally amazing. I get it, but everyone's read it already because it's a mainstream blog. And there's no point in me redirecting people to stuff they've already seen. What I can do is to uncover stuff that basically has not been seen by a wide audience and surface it up. So there's a friend of mine, in fact, there he is. I'm pretty certain that's him. Adam messaged
The
me.
recurring message.
Yeah. Should we look at that? I don't know. We should. Maybe
I
it's
don't
a bad
know.
thing.
There's Adam and Lars. Like, could there be?
It's possibly a bad sequence there.
We'll edit it out if
Possibly a
we
bad
have.
sequence.
We can
No,
like put a little fuzzy sticker over.
may require a fuzzy all-screen blot out. No. So Adam Gordon, he is the guy that is a good friend of mine. He co-hosts the Brainfood Live webinar with me on Fridays. But he jokingly calls what I do like DJing. He says, "Hung, you're the DJ of recruiting content. You're the Calvin Harris of recruiting content." Like,
I dated a DJ once.
Did you really?
In high school.
Terrible mistake that was, wasn't it? I'm
He
sure
was like
fabulous.
a DJ at like a teen club.
All right, I see.
But I learned what tweeters were, like the little speakers in cars, and I like started listening to some very interesting things.
Better stuff, right? So what your ex-boyfriend did is basically what I'm doing now for this audience, which is curating. He's not writing the music. He's just picking it out. And he's not picking out the top 10 hits because you've heard them all before. He's picking out the indie content. He's picking out the stuff that, you wouldn't notice because, you need to be deep into this topic to know it. Same reason why your favorite cocktail bar, if we ever get back to one of those places ever again, it's not going to be serving the standard stuff. It'll have different types of drink behind the bar because it's, hopefully the person who owns the bar has a vision as to what it's going to be. And it's going to be providing new tastes, new experiences for the audience, for a more discerning audience, right?
Right. Whereas I live in Florida, so our tiki bars, like our outdoor sandbar type places, have been open since lockdown was lifted, but they have been serving special drinks like Corona Ritas.
Right, Corona Rita. My goodness, it sounds less than appealing, I have to say. Maybe my mind had changed if I was on the beach somewhere. I don't know. Corona Rita, so that's basically a margarita made with Corona beer or something.
I think it's a margarita with some kind of something else in it. It's not like the beer. It's just named after the coronavirus.
Okay.
There must be a pandemic twist.
Pandemic theme to it. But you know what, bars and restaurants, consumer stuff is really important for this type of newsletter. Because remember, I'm not writing the original content. I'm actually curating stuff. No point in curating mainstream stuff because they've got it anyway. You've got to dive a layer deeper and pull out content like from this lady here. Has anyone heard of, was it lowercaseopinions.com? No, it's not like a particularly, right. It's not particularly well known, right? But it's a brilliant blog written by this lady called Maria Campbell, I think. And she's talking about how company values sometimes, how do you avoid company values from being these pithy comments on a poster on a wall to being something that is truly embedded into the company, the DNA of the company. And she dives into moral philosophy about it. And she talks about ethics and stuff like this. And that's Brainfood, right? Straight away, it's a little bit more challenging. It's not fluffy stuff. You're going to have to spend 5 minutes on this, but it's really good stuff. And therefore it goes into the newsletter. And that's basically how I decide what goes in or out. It's like, is it going to cause people to stop and think, I haven't thought of that before.
So you have like a tagline on LinkedIn, I think, or maybe somewhere else. And it was like more signal, less noise. And you've talked about that ratio, but this is what you're talking about, right? This is less of the stuff you can get everywhere else that is just what your grandparents, when they listen to your music, call noise.
Right.
And this is like Sinatra to them, or something like that sounds different and perfect, or maybe I should have named a different artist or something, but less noise equates to less of the same.
Let's put it this way, Ashley. This is why your subscribers have trusted you with their inbox.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's why they decided to take the risk and say, okay, you've got 2 minutes of my time. I'm gonna give you my email, put myself at risk of you spamming me. I'm going to give you this email because I trust you.
It's true.
I trust you to give me something that I otherwise wouldn't have time to find. Like not what I'm doing here is by no means genius, right? Literally, if you could spend 100 hours, you could come up with exactly the same thing. So it's not genius, but what I'm doing is basically picking out stuff that would save that person time to discover, and that person hopefully will get some value out of that. It saves them time and it makes them better for the work that they're passionate about. Why not? That's a good thing for them, good thing for me, good thing for the industry. So yeah, that's basically it. So content curation, a couple of elements on this. You're picking out stuff that other people will not find, so no mainstream stuff. Second thing that's actually super important is that you have to commentate on the content. So it's not enough to simply present a bunch of links and say, hey, this is great, see ya. And that's
I
your
call
email.
that a link dump.
I linked them. How charming.
It's
I had the
gross.
worst. I had the worst image in my mind when you said that. Um, but yeah, it's exactly that. And actually, there's another way in which sort of curated emails fail is when they do the link dump, because it's like, oh, you've kind of, your delivery of the content isn't concierge enough. Again, remember that I do think the consumer experience of bar restaurant is very, very apt, because you go to a cocktail bar, you don't want the cocktail simply delivered to you. You want to see the damn thing created. You want to see that guy shake it for 5 minutes. You need to see all of that stuff because it's part of the experience.
I have a feeling you spend far more time belly up to the bar than I do.
I'm actually not. I actually don't drink, but
Oh, that's too funny.
no, I
I'm
do
like,
drink.
wait a
But
second, maybe he doesn't have children.
yeah, that's the one thing. That's true. No, I tell you something. Let's dive into a bit of kind of, you're talking about philosophy, but this is the labor theory of value, right? Meaning that people will value stuff that you've seen labor and love put into it. Same reason why you would go to an artisanal bakery and pay 3 times the amount for a loaf of bread, because you know what? Some grandma's been kneading that bread, and you think that is worth more because there's something really important that's gone into that. It's because the human labor has gone into it. Same reason why you would pay, $10,000 for a Persian rug, because some person has actually woven that rug and woven that fabric. It's handmade. So this artisanal economy, this is like an artisanal newsletter. I would say most newsletters are artisanal. The ones that work are artisanal. Because there's a human creator that's really put their life and energy into it. Compare that to the standard marketing emails, newsletters that you get, signed into simply because you've had some sort of one-time interaction with something, and suddenly you're on a mailing list. No one ever cares about that. No one reads it. Guess what? The person actually that's sending you that email also doesn't care. And so when you put a lack of care into an exchange, you can't expect a lot of care out. Whereas I care. And other great newsletter writers, people who are watching this YouTube video, I guarantee you care. You wouldn't be watching this video unless you cared. And because you care, you put it into your work. People are going to feel that in some way when they read or consume it, which is why you have to put yourself in the newsletter. So even though you're not one of these people that is particularly, extroverted, me, etc., you may not be this person. Irrespective of that, your audience wants to see you in the shot. So hence you need to commentate on this email. You need to commentate on the content. And the way I understand this piece, which is just really 2 lines of commentary, is to say, listen, I'm going to tell you why it's in there. That's the only thing that paragraph is there. Why have I included this bit of philosophy into this newsletter? You're a recruiter. Why do you care about Immanuel Kant? Well, okay, fine. I'm going to tell you why, because it's about the reason why values oftentimes don't work when companies try to promote their values and why they do. And it's in there in that paragraph. And so that person will then know, do I click on this? Yes, no. And the aim, by the way, is always to save them a click. There's another lesson I would impart to people. And I know that, we all want click-through rates. We all want, all this type of stuff happening. Reality of it is, if you trick someone on clicking through a link, they're going to be pissed at you, and rightly so. You've just wasted their time. And remember, the purpose of recruiting Brainfood is to save time. So if I've tricked someone to click on something which is not particularly good, or not right, or I've misrepresented in some way, they're going to be pissed, and rightly so. So this content here that I write, didn't take me long, but I wrote it, is to save this person a click, and give them enough value in this so that they can go ahead and do that. There's people that have read the newsletter have told me they never click anything, and I said, okay. I was like, what? But they said, yeah, Hung, I don't have the time, but what I like is your commentary, because it gives me the overview. The commentary itself has given me enough for me to think on these things. And if I wanted to dive back in, I can do that. But that for me was music to my ears. It was like, okay, that's amazing. That's a really good thing to know, that I've saved this person time.
Right. Well, in that approach, you have delivered, like, I'm a journalist by trade, or once was before content marketing. And we talk about like a thesis or a nut graph, or this thing that basically in a small statement lets you evaluate whether you want to continue. You are putting a kernel of wisdom, like you're pulling out from the place you're sending them, like a synopsis of what they should expect more of, and then they get to basically qualify or disqualify themselves from going further, but they have absorbed what it is that you brought out as like the main point of the piece.
Right. And what did you call it? A nut graph?
A nut graph.
Good Lord. This is why I'm an amateur. I don't know the lexicon.
Well, that's just like, that's a journalism term that I haven't used in years, but it's basically like, and a teacher would assign you, go write this article here before you start, give me a nut graph. And
right. I need to, someone please find the etymology of that term, because it sounds, again, a little bit like link dump and stuff. There's like all kinds of like.
I'm actually usually quite proper, so
yeah, I wonder where all this is coming from. But conversation for another time. Okay, so yes, it is the nut graph, and it's also a way where human beings make this decision anyway. We always make this tandem way of doing it. Our first 5 seconds is it worth more than 5 seconds? And so your aim is not to trick them. Your aim is to give them, yeah, if you're this person and you're interested in this topic, then yeah. Hence why I label this stuff. I label, this is about culture, folks, or I label it, this is about remote working, or this is about D&I. I haven't obviously completed it all, but I will label it all very clearly in a taxonomy, so that, you know what, I'm tired of remote working content. I'm saying, great, you can skip this Dropbox thing. It's fine, move on.
So here's a good question then. Are you keeping the title of the original article, or are you using a new one, or are you kind of going back and forth?
Honestly, I try to preserve the title as much as I can, because that I don't want to editorialize that part. I think this is what it is. The only times where I alter it is if I need to truncate it, for instance, or if I feel that the article may have actually succumbed to clickbait themselves, but the article itself is really good, but they've just followed the wrong sort of advice and put something terrible on that wasn't representative as their title, then I may alter it, but very rarely no.
Okay.
I keep it as is. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so moving on, you basically curate a bunch of links. How I choose this, by the way, with Revue, the reason why I like it is this is drag and drop interface. You can just drag it in if you think it's relevant, and it's connected to a bunch of web clippers, which is really good. So on Chrome, on the iPad, on iPhone, or whatever it is, mobile wise, it's got these apps, which basically means that wherever you discover the content, you can clip it, stick it in this library, and you can slide it across. So for curated newsletters, I think it's a super efficient way of doing it, and hence why I've stuck with it for these this amount of time.
Do you have it connected to any other RSS or aggregators or other curation tools?
No, but I probably should.
Okay.
I mean, you know, there's like loads of things I should be doing, but I haven't because there's huge gaps in my approach, you know.
Okay.
But yeah, the answer is as advice, yeah, go ahead. You absolutely should do that. So okay, another thing that I've done is kind of evolve different segments into this. You notice when we start off with sponsors, then it's the Brainfood, and then suddenly we're talking about who's available, who's hiring. This is actually a new segment that I created, and this is generally in response to obviously COVID-19 and lots of people losing their work, and it was very, very difficult. So I wanted to create some space in the newsletter dedicated to helping people find work. So that's kind of staying there for as long as it needs to. There's a new segment here called Whose Story. This again is similar vibe in the sense that one of the features that I've discovered of living in 2020 is that our opportunities to actually have deeper conversations with people are actually now very limited. Especially if you're on lockdown and stuff like this, and I know different people in different spaces on this, but in the UK and London, generally speaking, lockdown is the experience. And it means that your conversations have been reduced to these like 30-minute Zoom calls. And whilst I'm a big fan of efficient transactions online, as like get in, get out, I'm exactly that guy. It also means that certain types of information don't have the opportunity to be exchanged in that interaction. The sort of stuff that would normally be exchanged if you went out and had a beer with somebody and you hung out for a couple of hours, that type of information. So anyway, Whose Story is a community gesture to say, hey, listen, let everyone tell their personal stories, either through a series of formats I've created, and we're going to publish it there. Okay, so I also include resources. So things like podcasts, I've created a big list of those things. I would also put on and drag in, if you like, new podcasts that were happening that week. So this side, it becomes a little bit more topical. We have a What's On segment, which typically is also about events, online events these days. What's interesting, again, that's topical also. A couple of other segments that kind of don't appear, depending on what's happening. Usually there's a job section, for instance. If there are jobs from the community that's relevant to this audience, that will go in there. So useful resources. And yeah, sometimes there's a news segment as well. So anyway, going on, I finish it with Endnotes, which is just basically a couple of paragraphs to say, hey, this is what I'm doing. Typically, this is an attempt at humor. So I'll say something stupid at this point. I'll typically introduce them to some internet weirdness as well. That through the journey of trying to curate all this stuff, you will encounter some amazing things on the internet,
Right.
that are totally not related to recruiting at all. But you know what? People should see it. So for instance, this is an example of that. This is like 141 optical illusions. It's simply a website with 141 optical illusions. Like people should go and waste some time there. It's fucking great. So that's like kind of a send off. Thank you very much. And then that's the end of that newsletter.
Excellent. So 214 issues in, what would you say were like your biggest lessons learned along the way from launch to now? Like things that you wish you had known or someone had told you that would have like kept you from spending time that you feel is actually like something you want back. Not like things you learned and you went through the process and you learned it and it was great, but like things that would save people.
Things that would save people. So I'm going to go with some bit of advice that I actually did take,
Okay.
and I'm the biggest skeptic of advice generally, I took a bit of advice right at the beginning of this journey, and the person who said it, it simply said, "Hung, you just got to commit to doing a fixed number." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Look, he was a podcast, a guy called Matt Alder, a good friend of mine." And he said, "Hey, when I did my podcast, I just committed to doing one of these a week. So I was going to stop until I did 52, and then I'd review it." And I said, "What? Okay, that seems like an extraordinary way to measure success is to actually commit a year to do it."
Mm-hmm.
But then I said, "Okay, that's fine. If he's going to do that, then I can do that. And it's only an email." And I realized the wisdom of this maybe halfway through, because basically the problem we have with trying to judge return in investment is that our frame for judging that assessment is usually too short. And this is particularly the case actually when you're employed and you're under pressure and people are saying, "Hey, your latest marketing campaign, where is the ROI?" It's like, and it's like
Yeah.
30-day time frame, 90-day time frame, something like
Mm-hmm.
that.
I
No.
think people compare it too much against the ROI on intention advertising, like pay-per-click advertising.
Mm,
And so they go, well, PPC is working super well. But it's really just that the attribution is there and we can clearly see numbers of impression, numbers of clicks, numbers of
right.
conversions, but it is very hard to measure the growth of a relationship.
That's exactly right. Like the quality of that click is different. And you'll
Mm-hmm.
learn that when you've got folks like these folks here. I would say they're fans of this newsletter now, to the point where they'll go bat for it. They will literally have they'd be hugely committed for it. And that is, but on those metrics, they will just be another click like everyone else.
Right.
So you're absolutely right. The relationship building is the real value of all of this, is the relationships that you build. And when you're doing audience building of this type, the amazing thing that I've learned is that, and it actually comes with a huge amount of responsibility actually, is that you're able to build asymmetrical relationships. um, Meaning that, traditionally when you think about relationship quality, it is a matter of energy in, energy out, right? Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
very difficult to have a relationship with someone if you're putting in 25% and she's putting in 85%. Guess what? Isn't going to be a long relationship, right? um, and that's true. And most people go 50-50. Friendships, those types of
Mm-hmm.
things, you're 50-50 in, and they're the best relationships. And usually you have to do that, which means there's a finite limit to the amount of relationships you can actually have, because you don't have the amount of energy to do it all.
Right.
The audience building, that equation goes out the window, because suddenly you can scale up those relationships asymmetrically. And I know, for instance, that over the time, and again with the habituation and stuff like this, people have ended up feeling like they have got to know me as a result of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is they have, because I'm pretty transparent online. I'm pretty transparent, and I'm everywhere, as you know, what podcast, webinar, etc. So if you really were into it, you could discover all this stuff. And because of that, they have built up a strong relationship with me, even though I may not even know them
Mm-hmm.
at a personal level. I know that they may be a follower or a subscriber. Um, Now, that's a really weird sensation to begin with.
Yeah.
Um, but you soon realize how privileged you are, that this is the situation that you have. And then you realize that, of course, you have the same relationship with other people that you follow. I think about the YouTubers I follow, and I love their content. Man, if I saw this, I forget his name, he does like military history or something. If I saw him, I'd literally go and get an autograph. That level.
Yeah.
So you become a fan. So everyone who, this is not about being big-headed. It's simply about, look, you've created this value to these people to the extent that they've stuck with you for 200 plus episodes or whatever it is. Of course, there's going to be a relationship built in this way. And the output of this is that you've got a huge privilege and a huge responsibility. So one of the things that keeps me going is in fact, I have a responsibility to this audience now.
Mm-hmm.
I can't not send this newsletter. I can't not do these shows, because that's what the audience wants. And basically, I feel like I need to service that community. Thankfully, I'm still into it, and it's not a chore for me. But the lesson I would impart as a result of this is the people on this journey. It kind of means it's super important that whatever you decide to talk about, you have to be inherently into it. Like you have to be
Can't be
intrinsically.
like some tangential hobby niche.
No, you have to be intrinsically motivated.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you were doing it purely to as a get rich quick scheme, or you're doing it as some sort of way to get out of whatever you're doing, or perhaps you're employed by someone and you're professionally doing it, I think the enthusiast is going to beat you basically, because the enthusiast
Mm-hmm.
can just pour energy into this, and will never fail because the enthusiasm is not going to fail. And that is the thing I think is the most important lesson to impart is that.
I love that. So you have multiple things going on. We talked about this when we opened. You've got a
Right.
podcast, you've got a web series, you're going live on Fridays on LinkedIn. I'm I'm hoping that I'm right in saying that the newsletter is kind of the core
Um,
of these things, but that may be evolving in different ways. I'd love for you to talk about how all of those things work together and whether newsletter as a launch into doing multiple things
yeah.
is something you would advise, or how that experience has been.
Yeah, which goes first, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, firstly, to go multi-channel is something that I always wanted to do. Back when not when I started, so that's a bit of a lie. I lied. It wasn't something I always wanted to
Gotcha.
do. Yeah, it was a lie, or shall we say, I misspoke. Isn't that the new way of describing lies? No, basically, it was when I was sort of already committed to the newsletter. I realized very quickly I needed to find other channels for this audience to communicate with each other,
Hmm.
and for them to interact with different types of content, stay on the same theme, but let's bring it to life in different ways so that people can enjoy this. So this is similar to this is so you end up creating, if you like, different channels. Which one goes first or not, I don't think it matters so much. I haven't tested it, so I don't know. But
Okay.
I went newsletter first, and then from the newsletter I ended up pointing them at different things and saying, hey, check this out. And now, as you say, there's about 5 or 6 different channels on there, some more active than others. But I can tell you, people have discovered those channels now independently. And I've had folks that follow the webinar series, and they say, "Oh, what, you have a newsletter?" And it was like,
Yay.
"What? Like, how do you not know?" I thought everything's meant to be pointing towards it. You didn't even know about that, so he didn't know about it because he
Mm-hmm.
was like totally into the series. So again, because you're enthusiastic about the topic, it doesn't matter what channel you're on. You just
Right.
do it, and then suddenly you're going to build up another audience there that will overlap, but not entirely. But the power of it is that you can point everyone to those places, and you can make it work. And as you build more of a momentum, it actually becomes a very powerful kind of ecosystem of channels that you
Mm-hmm.
have, because it means that even if one goes down for whatever reason, I don't know, you get booted off YouTube, or something happens, these things can happen. We're all prey to these
Yes.
tools, right? Something might occur, you get hammered, you know what, you
People
have
get put like
fallback.
in Facebook jail, right? That's what they used to call it. Like, I'm in Facebook jail now because I
Right.
did something, and
Terrible things.
I've
Probably
never been in Facebook jail.
probably misspeaking a lot. Yeah, no, but I've been on LinkedIn jail before.
Have you?
And yeah, because I'm a recruiter, obviously, or at least coming from a recruiter background. So you do
Mm.
all kinds of crazy things as a recruiter to try and get an edge. And yeah, LinkedIn sometimes isn't like that. So I am very aware of the power or the weakness you have by sitting on these platforms that have given you the opportunity to make an audience. And they can kind of they can change it up for you if you want. So you got to go multi-channel for sure, but only when you've made a success of one. I don't think it makes sense to big bang everything because you don't have the time or energy.
That's just an omni headache.
Yeah, you just create loads of work. Like over time, once a channel gets into your muscle memory and you can kind of do it, it's going to happen. Then suddenly it stops being work. We talked about habituation at the beginning of this show, Ashley. And actually, one of the features of this is that you actually habituate yourself. And if you've got yourself habituated to building a newsletter or doing video editing or doing whatever, it stops becoming so much work. It no longer becomes something occupies your brain. You just know you're going to do it, and you know what? Suddenly, it doesn't occupy that much time. So I would say it doesn't matter about the channel. Just shoot for one, go for it, make a success of it. Success meaning purely that you are going to continue doing it. So it's not about the numbers of subscribers or whatever it is. The measurement of success is, are you enjoying it? And are you personally getting value from this? Then great, keep going. And once you've got that mindset on the go, then do something else. I think it's very important actually to divorce the immediate results, so to speak, to this objective. To use another analogy, it's kind of like playing golf. You're in Florida, right? You play a lot of golf, Ashley. I'm sure you do. Like the worst thing you can do is, keep looking at the hole and trying to freak out on that. Concentrate on the swing. Of course, you look up to see where you need the ball to go. But if you don't focus on how you're going to swing and connect with the ball, it isn't going to go there. So in the same way, I think when you're doing content and you're looking at results, you have that same kind of calibration. You can't keep your eye always on the numbers, so to speak. Make sure you're doing quality work all the time, and the numbers are going to come. And that's another feature of this world that we have, is that we're sending this stuff out in a globalized way, and people will eventually find it. And once there's a momentum to it, the bigger it gets, the easier it is to find. That's a clear network effect. The more people that subscribe to a newsletter, for instance, the more advocates you could potentially have, right? And then before you know it, you've got a bunch of more people that you can handle. So, the key thing is go single channel and then use one successful channel to see the others when you feel that you're ready for it. But the same principle, commit to doing them. So the cadence is very important there as well. You want to do a podcast break. Well, okay, think of a cadence as the when you're going to do that, and stick to that.
I love that. So are there any other tabs that you want to share before we stop screen sharing?
Yeah, I
know we might not go to where Adam is chatting.
That number's gone up from 9 to 12. So I wonder why.
There is like a recruiting crisis.
What the messaging is there. Okay, so let's go firstly to, I'll go to the homepage, okay? So I had this built. This is just in WordPress, as you can see. Forgive the face there, but I actually got this picture because I realized that my face was now synonymous with recruiting Brainfood. And I thought I just needed something there. So anyway, we've got subscribe here. It's not very good, but it works. And then there's a bunch of tools that I've built, search engine here. So the advantages, I think, of having some technical connections is the ability to build useful tooling that can help people. This is all the curated content, by the way, that remember the categories that I put them in a meticulous way. It means that if you're super interested in culture, for instance, you can go here and you can see all of the content in culture, and you can find it and retrieve it rather than having to dig through emails, which no one's going to do.
Okay, question I'm dying to ask right now. Is that automated, or are you doing that manually?
No, that's basically we built a scraper to do that. But essentially we have a bit of software to help us do it. So this is a small app that we've built.
Gotcha.
But it's everything is built on a newsletter, and then we have applications sitting around the newsletter, so to speak. Okay, let's have a look at something else. This here is Brainfood Live. So this is basically my webinar series, essentially. You see, we have a different set of followers, right? 1,200 followers there, which is what, maybe 5% of the overall, 10% maybe of the overall audience share, or whatever it is. Maybe my brain doesn't even work. Whatever percent it is, it's a small percent in the
Right.
newsletter, right? However, this thing is just a weekly show. We're going to be talking to the people typically in the community. So next week, I've got this guy, Dave Hazelhurst. He's one of the big subscribers of the newsletter. He's also great on employer branding. I'm sure he's great on newsletters as well. But he's going to come on. We're going to talk about how pandemic has changed employer branding before and after. And that's basically a weekly show I'm going to do, an hour's worth of time. Excellent stuff. Another thing, I'm actually going to go to Facebook here. So, not safe for work, folks, just in case.
Close your eyes.
So the reason why I'm here is, let's cut this down, is because I want to show you the group. I put it on Facebook. And by the way, you can see it's all sponsored now, which is also another good way to kind of get money in, if you like. But the idea is I wanted a place where people can have communication. The subscribers could have dialogue with each other without just being on the end of an email. So hence I created this group. There's 3,500 members there. I think it's about 2,000 people in the queue. So it's a popular place for people that want to come in and talk about recruiting Brainfood. So loads of different stuff like this. It might be a chat bot. There's no point. I mean, ultimately, let me just end the screen share here. Ultimately, there's like a bunch of stuff that you can do after the fact. Actually, I can't end the screen share. How do you do this?
I can stop it. Do you want me to override you? Okay.
No, I'll stop the screen share here. Cool. Yeah, I mean, basically, the message is start on one channel, have multi-channels. Once you've built some success, use that one channel to see the others, but then make sure you put the energy in once you see that you're enjoying it and it actually grows, and it'll eventually grow its own. So it'll propagate on its own way, and people will find its way back to those channels. They'll discover different things, and they're great ways to go and promote that way as well. So yeah, I mean, that's basically I think a decent pattern to work with.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, for filling our heads with Brainfood. Newsletter Brainfood, maybe that's a spinoff we can collaborate on one day.
I don't patent the term Brainfood, so yeah, I don't think it's possible. Go ahead and steal it.
But I need your face. Like, I need your graphic to really sell it. So
it would, seriously, you'll find out how much of an impediment is to that effect once you have to use it. So no.
I know. I laugh because I include a picture of me in front of some books, and I'm always like, oh, is this like books is my branding? Like, do I secretly want people to think I've read everything on my bookshelf?
I see your bookshelf. I mean,
that's like a fourth of my bookshelf. It goes like all the way. Well, my husband and I have a variety of interests. So he has, I don't know, there's like a Japanese word for what it means to buy books you like more than you will ever read. There's like a term for it.
Really? Things that Japanese do a lot of, I guess. Yeah.
I don't know why they named, like they gave that a name. We haven't yet, but he volunteers at a bookstore that is like a Friends of the Library bookstore, which is a very bad situation for him, because then he gets discounts on the books that he's, so it's, of all the addictions or sicknesses that your spouse could have, I'm going to go with it's okay if he's addicted to buying books he might not read.
I do agree as well. Yeah.
But we will end this show right here. I'm going to include links below, so you can go to all of the Recruiting Brainfood sites and sources for information. We would love for you to add comments and questions for Hung, for Curated. Anything about recruiting and HR, I think, could be included in there, as well as about newsletters, just so that you can kind of get a taste of what it is that we're offering. And I will contact you if someone puts a comment in the YouTube to like point you towards like, hey, they're looking for an answer about this, about newsletters, and we'll kind
Yeah,
of get a
absolutely.
dialogue going if people are interested.
Totally. I'll be totally up for that.